change gears again, this time to cancer, where of course hypoxia is very important for the pathophysiology, prognosis, and so forth. And it is a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Prigozhin again back to the stage. You were also here last year, and we look very much forward to hear of your newest ideas and discoveries. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So for those who were here, so first of all, as you know, the tumor. Yeah, I think it's much better for you to hear me. So as you know, the tumor imaging is something quite challenging, both for initial diagnosis to know what kind of tumor is it. Should we first do the biopsy? Should it be directly operated? And particularly for the follow-up on the multiple treatments. Each time we have new treatments, and it will completely change the follow-up. But the question is always the same. Is there any response to the treatment? Should we continue it? Or if the lesion is progressing, should we change it? And even if every time there are new treatments, still we have to give the precise reply, because there are not thousands of treatments, and if the treatment is efficient, we should keep it. So the perfusion imaging appeared a long time ago in the tumor imaging, mostly with the marker like the relative cerebral blood volume. That gives not that bad results in meta-analysis. But if you look in the threshold, the results are extremely different. So use it for individual cases can be frequently very challenging. And we need sometimes other markers to help us. Also, there are other problems with the pseudo-responses on the angiogenic treatment, and also artifacts on the sequences. Like here we have this. Yeah, here we have this contrast enhancement, and there are multiple bleedings. And so it's very difficult to answer in this map. It's impossible if there is any hyperperfusion or not. Also, sometimes we will talk about this situation. We have a real hyperperfusion, but does it mean it means that there is some tumor tissue? But does it mean that the lesion will actually progress? So there are also other methods like arterial spin labeling, giving us cerebral blood volume only, except some new sequences we can have other markers. And it's less sensitive to artifacts, like you can see here. We can see that actually there is hyperperfusion. Still, in the studies, the diagnostic performance remains imperfect, and it's not always enough. So the other technique that is currently used a lot is the PET imaging. So when you have a chance, like we have, you can use the PET MR imaging. If you don't, we do separately PET and MR. It should be done as close in the time as possible, because the lesions are fastly progressive, and it's not always easy to exactly reslice the imaging and to see what corresponds to what. So the studies has shown that when you use the PET MR, you are much better in the both first tumor assessment and also in progression detection. And not only because we are very happy when we can better do the diagnosis, but it actually changed the patient management. The problem is that we are still not on 100, we are until around 80 and something %, so there is still a gap, and also that it is done with the amino acid traces that are expensive, that availability is quite low, and we cannot do it on all the patients. So we are looking to something else. Also, another problem with the PET imaging. So we are mostly using the amino acids like DOPA or FET, dependent on what you have. The diagnostic performance is not perfect, but it can be helpful. And the one that is most available is the FDG, but because there is already a high cerebral binding to FDG, and also it is sensitive to inflammation, infection, post-operative changes, the diagnostic performance is very low. So now when we take together both PET and MR with perfusion, what we can see that what we see doesn't coincide exactly. So then could be a complementary information between what we have on perfusion and what we have on TAP. Another problem that we can see here is that this study that we did, so we analyzed the PET imaging together with MRI, so the performance increased, but what we had to take into account also to increase the performance with the bleedings, because in PET imaging, on the contrary to what we think, we can have the false positive cases because of the bleeding. So it doesn't resolve us completely the problem. Now we have been talking already a lot since this morning about the markers, just the little reminder of what we are using in the tumor imaging. So we try to use them all. It's still under evaluation which one is bring us most of information. We'll talk about it. So one of the things that is basic and important, and I hope all of you are doing today in the tumor imaging, that we have to look at the corrected cerebral blood volume that is corrected for leakage. And also sometimes it's interesting to look on these leakage maps that can bring us information. Then when we go to the more advanced things, we look on the CTH, that is capillary transit time heterogeneity. We have our oxygen extraction fraction that we have been already talking a lot with stroke imaging today, as well as the CMRO2. So let's look on some of examples. So for the first assessment, here we have this huge tumor lesion. So there is no doubt that it's a tumor lesion. But the question is, where are we going to biopsy this patient? And that is where it is interesting to have all the markers, because here we have this huge increase of RCBV and CMRO2 also, but we have a small increase in CTH. So we can suppose, so maybe in this region is the region where the lesion is in transformation, and it will be most interesting to do the biopsy here. And actually it was an anaplastic oligodendroglioma. So now another case. So here we have also a young man with headache, dizziness, and we see this lesion. So we have some contrast enhancement, and it's extremely difficult to analyze the perfusion on the cortico-subcortical lesions because we have a lot of vessels. But when we look in our advanced maps, we can see that here we have the CTH increase and also the OF increase. So we can suppose that probably there is something suspect. So this patient was operated. Actually, it was a glial lesion. And here you can see it's early post-op imaging. And we have also the PET. So it's not because we have a PET MR in our institution that we are doing PET MRI to all the patients post-op. You can see, think, why are we doing this? So we were doing this because of this second lesion. Actually, in this patient initially we have found 2 lesions. So when you find 2 lesions like this, you can suppose that maybe these are metastases. Actually, he had the whole body extension imaging. We found nothing. He was operated for this first lesion. and not for the second one because it was less accessible, and first lesion was glial lesion. So let's look on this one now. So when we are going back to this first imaging, when we look at it, there is contrast enhancement with some hyperperfusion, but CTH and OF are completely normal. They are not behaving at all the same way as we saw their behavior in our first lesion. And actually, on the follow-up, that's why we did the PET, here you see that there is no metabolism increase. And if we do the corrected RCBV, there is actually no hyperperfusion. And finally, this enhancement regressed, and probably it was a small ischemic lesion that regressed. Another story for the now we are going to the follow-up. So we have this lesion. This is the first assessment because of the seizure, and we can see this highly suspicious lesion with increase of all the markers. And then the patient was treated with radiochemotherapy, and here we can see it's again this difficult case where we have a lot of vessels in the region, and we have difficulties to evaluate the cerebral blood volume. So we are going to CMRO2, and here we have less difficulties. We can see that there is this nodular lesion. Well, these maps were retrospectively reconstructed because initially we just followed up this patient with PET MRI, and actually the lesion increased. And also here we can see that is hypermetabolic, and we have also OF increase, and this was a progression. So, as we saw in the first, in the case, one of the first cases, when we have the discordance between multiple maps, it can be helpful because if the maps are not the same, we can think, okay, maybe it's not the same lesion. Now, here it's the opposite. So first of all, we have this patient with grade 3 astrocytoma, surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, classical story. And we have this contrast enhancement that appears, but it's not nodular, so maybe it's radionecrosis. And we see no hyperperfusion on cerebral blood volume. But on the PET imaging, it's quite intermediate. As we have seen in the beginning, we have to compare it to striatal enhancement and to striatal uptake, and we want to see the uptake that is higher than the one of striatum. So actually here it was intermediate, but when we look also on CTH and OF, they are both quite increased. So in this case, we concluded with this intermediate PET that it was a progressive lesion, but actually it was. But what is interesting that there was also this cavity. And for this, there was initially even no doubt. Everybody considered that this was a necrotic lesion. It's so cystic. But when we look on our maps, we have exactly the same profile that doesn't differ between two lesions. And here we can use this similarity of the profile to see, okay, actually this is also a progressive lesion and not radionecrosis. Another story here. So this patient was treated with radiochemotherapy, then Timodal, finally Avastin, and here we can see this necrosis that we can see here with high T1 signal, but there is some peripheral enhancement. So is it just necrotic enhancement or is there anything? When we look on the basic perfusion, we can see some hyperperfusion. Does it exist? No. Actually, all this was related to the leakage, and when we look with the leakage correction, actually all the increased perfusion disappear. So this is the importance of looking on this correction. Also, there was a negative PET and the CMRO2, so all the markers were very reassuring, and the patient continued to be stable for a while under this treatment. Then we have, so we looked on the subcortical lesions that are difficult. Also, the other lesions that are very difficult to evaluate are these basal temporal lesions. So we have a lot of vessels and a lot of artifacts. So it's difficult, but still we have lesions in this region, so we have to do with it. So let's see here, we have this patient with some contrast enhancement. What is this? Does it exist? Doesn't it exist? We look on the arterial spillabilin perfusion, it's negative, but also the resolution is not that great, and the lesion is small. On the perfusion, on the cerebral blood volume, we cannot really conclude. And when we look on the OF, actually in this whole region, we see that there is a little increase. Also on CTH, CMRO2 is probably, but it's difficult to say. So we have this modelization of the lesion that correspond to this region, and actually it's perfectly matched what we have seen as increased metabolism on PET imaging. So there was actually a progression. Also, sometimes we don't see the progression yet, but the idea is to try to predict it, because when the lesion is already too much progressive, it will be difficult to control the tumor, and if we can predict the progression in advance, we can be more efficient in tumor modification. So here we have this contrast enhancement. And we slice it on cerebral blood volume, we can imagine that we see something, but actually we don't really. It's difficult to say if there is something that exists. When we see on the corrected cerebral blood volume, it's already something that is much more prominent. And if we see on this map of the curve, that is the map that takes into account the cerebral blood flow and oxygen extraction fraction, we can see the real increase. We can this increase correlate to what we see on the PET imaging perfectly. And actually the treatment was not changed somehow, and 1 month later the patient progressed a lot on this lesion. So it's something that could have been predicted from the beginning, and we could have changed the treatment before. Another complicated case. So here we have this oligodendroglioma that had surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, another surgery, and then we have this contrast enhancement lesion with the 2 spots of metabolism that we can separately analyze. There is one that is temporal intern and increased. But actually there is a bleeding here. So is it increased because of the bleeding or because of there is a progression? And then here it's quite reassuring, it's intermediate. And when we look on our CTH map in the beginning, we don't see much, but maybe there is something still here in this region. So we do the control after. Here actually this is contrast free, there was a bleeding. And we see that there is increase exactly in this region, and together with increase of CTH. So this was something that actually already existed. And here it remains stable, even if it's increased, so maybe this was correlated more to the bleeding. But it's still something quite difficult to analyze these multiple components of the tumor. Another story of the lesion evolution prediction. So here there is a follow-up that is quite reassuring if we don't look on the OIF map. Actually, initially we didn't. It was a pity, because 2 months later, in this region that we see here with the increased OIF, there was this huge lesion that progressed. So another thing is to look on the lesion in time. How does it progress, and how can we look on the multiple component on this lesion? So here we have this lesion that was progressing. Actually, we didn't know, was it progressing or was it rhabdomyosarcosis? The contrast enhancement was progressing over 3 months. Also, we can see that the CTH and the OAF increase. And we cannot see much in the cerebral blood volume. Why? Let's see here. So we can do the measurements. So we segment separately the necrosis volume, the enhancement volume, and the edema volume. So with this we are very happy, but we still don't know if it's progressing or if it's rhabdomyosarcosis, because the enhancement and edema can progress in both. So we will do something more interesting. We will look separately the enhancement and the edema, and we will measure the cerebral blood volume, but we can also measure other markers inside this. And then we will see that there is a gradual increase exactly inside this contrast enhancement, and this is very helpful because we cannot, if we measure in the global lesion, it can be more difficult to take into account the difference between the necrosis, the enhancement, and the edema. Another story here, also this contrast enhancement, and we have the increase in CTH-OF and also increase on PET uptake, and it was predicted of the progression. So we see that it can be helpful in difficult regions like subcortical and temporal region. It can be helpful to predict the progression, but can it be helpful for global prediction of prognosis? So here we have this case. So if we don't look on the advanced imaging, we can imagine that it's quite easy. Here we have our flare, lesion in high flare signal with some bleeding and some contrast enhancement, and actually 2 years later it decreased. So we can suppose that it was not a progressive lesion. But we don't have directly this 2 years after imaging. So let's see, when we look on the first day, so we have this contrast enhancement and we have this hyperperfusion. And it was also hypermetabolic in PET imaging, so all was at red, and we thought, okay, this is a progressive lesion. But actually, it was a complicated patient. We could not really modify the treatment immediately. And also clinically, the patient was better. So we don't only treat the image, we also have to treat the patient. So he continued with the same treatment. And what happened 2 years after, actually the lesion was progressively decreasing. So here our markers, if we would look at them in the beginning, this was the retrospective reconstruction, could actually help us to be reassuring from the beginning that the patient actually will not progress. And to finish, another complicated case. So here we have some contrast enhancement in this grade 2 glioma, but type B, so with some hyperperfusion, and there was some hypercellularity, there was some PET uptake, but actually we couldn't see much on perfusion, and particularly not in our advanced markers. And there was a second lesion. This one was a little bit hyperperfused in ISL, but nothing in our advanced markers, and it was hypermetabolic. So when we followed up these lesions, actually both of them decreased. Also the one here that had all the advanced markers that were negative, and even the one where we saw some hyperperfusion with ISL but not with the advanced markers, as you can see, it also decreased. So finally, now we started we have a lot of case-based analysis. So now we started to do the global analysis retrospective of our cases. It's very preliminary. We are only on 40 cases. So mostly what we can see that there is a very good correlation between the advanced maps, particularly OF and CTH, and our PET-DOPA results. In some cases, we also there is a strong added value between what we see with PET-DOPA and what we see with the advanced markers. And there are some cases where it's discordant. So we are also increasing our cohort and will analyze these cases to see who was actually right. So the questions are, can this advanced marker somehow replace PET, particularly when it's not available? Who is the strongest predictor? Should we have both of them? How does it influence the prognosis? And also, maybe sometimes we can use cheaper PET traces when we have the advanced markers. So just to finish, it can also be helpful besides the glial lesions on metastatic lesions. Like here we see the increase of all the markers that is quite symmetrical, and that helped us to do this glioblastoma diagnosis. And also we can use it for lesions like this lymphoma. So thank you for your attention, and hopefully next year I will be able to present you the end of our analysis to see how PET and advanced markers correlates. But for now, on our preliminary cases, there is really good correlation, and I think we can work on it more to see who are the best predictors. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this exciting presentation. Are there questions from the audience? I was going to ask, how difficult is it to look at these maps? Because you have many, you have nuclear medicine, and you have many different maps. So in practice, who looks at them, and how easy do they find it to find those spots?
So it's a very good question, because there are a lot of maps, and it's not always easy to put all these maps together and say what is the most helpful. So for now, what I'm mostly looking on is, of course, the corrected cerebral blood volume. Then I look on CTH. That helps me a lot. So with this one, I already have my little idea. Then I add the oxygen extraction fraction, and at the end, the CMRO2. So usually I look a little progressively to see exactly, to make my idea. Then I correlate it with the PET, because we usually work together with the nuclear medicine physician. So he already did his PET quantification. And then we look together and we do a little multidisciplinary meeting between us to decide with all our markers, what do we think actually, is it a progression or is it radionecrosis?
Thank you so much. I'd like to be a fly on the wall in that, although I don't understand French, but I'm sure there's something interesting going on. There was a question here? Yes.
I think so. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I'm Dr. Cem Çallı from Izmir, Turkey. We are an oncology center. We are using a lot of perfusion for the oncology patients. Well, I don't have PET, so I don't have any comparison with the PET, especially with F-DOPA. But looking at the DSC perfusion maps, actually, if you ask me which the most I trust is the cerebral blood volume. Not even, you also didn't show any cerebral blood flow. Because I realized that cerebral blood flow sometimes is low, And because there was a lot of publications saying that they are both the same. But actually, in my experience, I don't believe it that the cerebral blood volume is much more important. Do you think, you show some cases, but do you think that these new maps with the SCMRI bring also some, more trusts, or any of these, let's say, cerebral blood volume is low. When you look at the CTH, there are some high areas. So did you have any post-operative correlations that where CTH is high, that you think that there might be a recurrent tumor, especially in the post-operative, post-treatment patients? So are there any histological results that the CTH was right and cerebral blood volume was wrong?
Okay, so there are a couple of questions in your questions. So first of all, cerebral blood volume is the marker that we use most, also because most of the studies are based on it, and a lot of patients are included in the studies. For the cerebral blood flow, this is something that I'm usually looking at, particularly using ISL, because there are less artifacts. Not much looking on the cerebral blood flow in the C perfusion, so this is something that maybe we should also compare. Now going back to your second part of the question about the CTH. Most of my experience today with the cases that I have are based on PET correlation or on the correlation with the progression. We still don't have a lot of correlation with the biopsy, but we have one study where there were several patients, quite a few patients that had a biopsy, and they all had perfusion before. So we are planning to retrospectively analyze this data with CTH in order to see if there is actually the correlation or not. So this is something that is ongoing.
Thank you so much for your discussion and presentation.
Thank you.